Welcome back to the Ulduar Raid Guide. Call me Splug. In this video, I'll be going over our strategy for the Yogg-Saron Alone in the Darkness achievement. If you'd like more information or would like to learn more about downloading this movie, click More Info on the movie information box on YouTube to head directly to TankSpot. Also, be sure to subscribe by clicking on the subscribe button to the right so you will be automatically notified as we release movies. The Yogg-Saron hard modes are activated by beginning the encounter without calling down the keepers. Each keeper added grants a unique passive defensive effect, a flat 10% damage done increase, and a slight encounter changing effect. This means that both damage and survivability requirements relative to easier settings are incrementally higher. In addition, the margin for personal error is reduced by removing the sanity wells and Hodor's ice block save. Finally, the altered mechanics make for more rigid or complex overarching strategies to be utilized. We've approached Phase 1 by tanking and killing all spawn guardians in the center. This reduces raid movement by allowing the ranged and healers to pick from a wider variety of positions to utilize. It becomes easier to pick areas that will be free of clouds for a longer period. Remember that the clouds move in predictable patterns. Assigning one of your ranged as a meteorologist to forecast raid movement well in advance will be beneficial. Melee positioning is extremely simple. There are two clouds orbiting in non-concentric circles at the center. Their paths intersect at 2 points per revolution. Whenever the intersection occurs, the tank should pull the Guardian to the point of intersection as soon as the clouds clear, and remain there until the collision occurs again on the opposite side of their orbit. As we needed 2 tanks to manage Phase 3 anyway, we also chose to alternate tanking Guardians in Phase 1. You'll also notice my camera is zoomed extremely far out for this encounter. This helped me personally to locate Guardian spawns in Phases 1 and 3, as well as locate tentacles in Phase 2. While I do recommend a deep zoom distance for tanking the encounter, your mileage may vary. We found it was easiest to allow melee to remain at point-blank range during the explosions. The raid damage incurred is less problematic than the possibility of letting a last-second Shadow Nova cast. Enhancement Shaman are the only class we experience difficulty keeping alive through the detonation. It may behoove them to leave melee range if they do not have a power word shield. However, melee players do need to leave ground zero in the event that they are suffering from either Sarah's Fervor or Sarah's Blessing. By focusing Sarah during this phase, it is possible to have ample time to get clear of melee before the debuff is even applied. If your name appears in the focus target's frame, it's time to go. The boss's 15-minute berserk timer is a complete non-issue. Other factors will cause your raid to be overwhelmed long before reaching that mark. As such, there is no cause to force spawn additional guardians in this phase. When the final guardian detonates, Sarah will begin the transition to Phase 2. It is likely one guardian will have just spawned and still needs to be killed. The first set of tentacles is a special case. This is the only time where melee will be available to assist for sustained time. As such, ranged damage should focus fire the Crusher as quickly as possible. If they can position conveniently near a Corruptor tentacle, melee can burn the Corruptor. We use a full-time tank on the Crushers to prevent them from channeling suppression. When the tentacle's stacking anger effect reaches 10 applications, the tank should use a major defensive cooldown such as Shield Wall or Divine Protection. If it exceeds 30, or the damage reduction cooldown is going to expire prior to the tentacle, the tank will need to leave and allow suppression to channel. Before the Crusher dies, a second Corruptor will spawn. Again, if this is in range for melee to reach without getting out of heal range, it is worth the risk of a slightly longer Brain Link to kill it now. Constrictor Tentacles remain the highest priority for all players, and should be addressed as quickly as possible whenever they trigger. With the first portal spawn, the standard cycle of Phase 2 begins. Players who are assigned to portals will need to pay attention for the portal spawn and be sure to arrive in position on time. They also need to pay particular attention for Malady of the Mind and ensure they are not struck by it just as the portals become active, if at all possible. Any player brain linked to the portal crew should accompany the linked player. If portal players with opposite portals are linked to each other, one of them will need to negotiate a trade quickly to keep in range of their brain link. Another common danger is a last-second Constrictor Tentacle squeezing a member of the portal team. We address this by having 2 paladins assigned to Hand of Protection duty for each portal spawn on opposite sides of Yogg-Saron. If one of the paladins uses their Hand of Protection, they need to inform the next paladin in the rotation to take their position at the next portal spawn. Brain Links may force a last-second substitution here as well. While it seems like a simple concept, the portal entry is actually one of the largest sources of random unavoidable wipes in the encounter. Having this system of countermeasures drastically increase the chances of the entire team warping in properly, which reduces the time to stun. The portal crew's composition is fairly detailed and important as well. Due to their limitations in the main encounter room, we load as many of our melee into the portal as possible. Using a melee-heavy team also allows us to concentrate melee-based utility in that area easily. Additionally, it is necessary to ensure all forms of debuff removal are present to counter last-second Corruptor harassment. We use a Retribution Paladin, Restoration Druid, and Enhancement Shaman to accomplish this goal. We found running 9 damage and 1 hot heavy healer to be the most reliable way to clear out the tentacles quickly. Running 10 damage and 0 healers on the 25-player version of the encounter proved to often result in players being unable to finish their tentacle without dying to reflected damage, which caused delays. A hunter is usually included in the portal room as well, to provide aspect of the pack after triggering the stun. The players remaining outside the portal need to keep up with tentacle spawns throughout the encounter. As this will require killing at least 1 Crusher and 2 Corruptors per portal cycle, rushing the Crusher first is not necessary. The tentacle crew should try to remain together as much as possible. The tank healers will need to follow the active tank to wherever the Crusher tentacle spawns. Everyone else remains together and circles either left or right to reach the Crusher in a timely fashion. Along the way, the raid will focus fire down whatever tentacle happens to be closest. If more than 1 tentacle is in the area, dot-heavy classes such as Affliction Warlocks or Shadow Priests should split damage between them to maximize throughput. Whenever a target drops below 100,000 health, call a damage switch. The last salvo attacks in flight, combined with the lingering dot effects, should be enough to bleed the target out. Having damage continue sustained fire at that point is only wasting time. On the 3rd portal phase, you should be approaching the phase 3 trigger point. If your portal team has been on pace, you may need to call damage off of the brain for part of this time. If the portal team is ahead of pace, it may even be reasonable to send some melee out to get into position for phase 3 early. Do not trigger the phase 3 spawn until right before Induced Madness would finish casting. This provides more time for the tentacle crew to finish clearing out the area out top and move into a finalized position, preferably in Yogg-Saron's rear arc to allow shred damage and avoid melee from being parried. Healers will position 30 to 40 yards away from the tanks and directly away from Yogg-Saron. Holy Paladin should enable Righteous Fury at this time, as attracting spawn to the healer camp will help reduce range damage casualties if Guardians spawn in the tank's rear arc. Ideally, no Corruptors will remain alive as Phase 3 begins. If a Corruptor tentacle is lingering, it will need to be finished before beginning Yogg-Saron damage. If a Crusher tentacle is lingering with more than a sliver of health, the delay caused is very likely to cause a wipe. No tank will be available to prevent the suppression debuff for long.